Good day, everybody. Welcome to today's Business Spotlight. And today we focus on Mr. Paul McClatchie from Engage People Recruitment. Paul, you're very welcome.
Very good morning, Tom. Thank you very much.
Very good. And it's still morning, but it got even. So I see the clock behind you says after midday. So good afternoon, technically. Anyway, let's kick off. Can you tell our audience, please, what do you do and how long have you been doing it?
So, Tom, thanks very much for the invite to today's discussion. So I have worked in the financial recruitment space. I used to say 20 years, but probably 22 years now at this point. I run Engage People, which has been recognised as Ireland's best small agency over the last 2 years at the Employment and Recruitment Federation Awards. So we have 4 core areas of focus, being accounting, banking, insurance and legal. And we're soon to add a technology division as part of our service offering. So previous to that, I spent 10 years at CPL, who was one of Ireland's larger recruitment companies, where I was a director. I set up Engage People in 2016.
Fantastic. And CPL obviously went on to bigger and better things and made serious money for some people, which is great. So you've been in the business quite a while. So obviously during COVID, it changed things for you, or did it? Or did the business slow down, or did it actually help you?
Yeah, good question. So so there's, I think we've a team of 15 or 16 people now. We had 5 going into COVID, and I would say 5 good people who were committed. So my first focus really was to retain and develop, and provide a level of comfort. The sector, as you can imagine, went through quite a few changes at the time. Just a lot of companies stopped hiring. The areas we were focused on, so accountancy would be industry, which is sort of anything and everything really. Most companies of a sort of a medium or larger size have a finance team. So it was obviously focusing our attention then on the sectors where, that had remained sort of solid in that front. I think from a service offering perspective, we realized pretty quickly that in-person interviews was probably not going to take place at all, or certainly less frequently. So we started to offer a video interviewing process to our clients. So that could be through something like Teams or Zoom, which effectively people could set up themselves. But we acquired a piece of software which enabled us to have conversations with candidates and record the conversations and share them with our clients, which we found to be very useful. We find that speeded things up significantly. So particularly for roles at a more junior level, and we've sort of retained that now. So if you picture, a company might be hiring, in addition to receiving a CV now, there might be a 15 or 20-minute conversation, or actually shorter, probably more likely 5 or 10 minutes. We used to have them longer, but we realized pretty quickly that people tend to watch the first 5 minutes, which is sort of fair enough. And that's been very useful to assess a candidate's interview skills and to cover off some pieces. Some of our clients say, "Oh, look, I like them, I want to hire them," and we'd say, "No, look, you've sort of met them on video, or you've seen them on video. They haven't met you yet. So there's still the rest of that process is important." I think the other piece was just particularly within the SME space, we found that a lot of companies were really struggling to get people. There's major skill shortages. So we partner with a lot of Irish businesses and work with them on building their own employer value propositions. So there's sometimes a mindset that that everyone wants to work for Google and Facebook and LinkedIn. And as you and I know, Tom, that's not necessarily the case. While some people enjoy working with multinationals, a lot of talented people want to work with Irish companies and work with businesses that are going in exciting directions. So we would partner with companies. We have a process basically to build out their own employer value proposition, and to really tighten up that interview process, and to scream out to the right candidates what that business is doing and what they offer. So that's 2 areas in which I suppose we sort of doubled down on and really focused in during COVID, which was very, very beneficial for us.
And interesting, so we moved online, obviously, and the Zoom or the Teams or these sort of things became common day practice. So for you then, it's very important to have this alliance with the business sectors to really understand what type of people they're understanding, not just people, so you'd have a lot of conversation on the front end, so to speak, with the clients before you then engage with people who are coming in. And presumably if you got 50 people applying for a job, you're not going to send the 50 videos or whatever to your client to go through. You'll select from them yourself and give them the top 3 or 4. Is that the way you do it?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It would be rare enough we get 50 applications for a
yeah.
role. We do advertise across various channels. A lot of the business is being sort of specialists in the area. So my areas would be sort of CFOs, finance directors, and that's the space I've worked in for the majority of my career.
Right.
Some of my team then would be focused in on recently qualified accountants, for example, and they would just focus in on that area. So they're able to provide a good bit of guidance. Someone might come and say, look, we're looking for X or Y, and we'd be able to provide pretty good guidance about skills and availability at the different levels, and the sort of time frame for success. So yeah, I think I think the transparency and partnership piece has really evolved over the last 2 or 3 years in our sector. Like in the past, it would have been common for a company to work with 5 or 6 different recruiters. Rarely works, to be honest. We really want to partner people and then really commit that we're going to be able to be successful. And it's obviously what you say yes to is very important, but equally what you say no
Yeah.
to. So rather than taking on roles which are going to be very, that may not be in our space, that we're unlikely to fill, we'd rather, maybe suggest to the company that's probably not us, and that we'd probably recommend someone else in that space. So yeah, I think that communication piece up front is really important.
And if I could ask you maybe an unfair question, obviously people will say, oh, I've got this degree, that degree, and this experience, that experience. They're all kind of important just to get a flavor. But how high would you rate attitude?
I think the fundamentals within, say, in qualified accounting, I mean, there are fundamentals that one would need to have, whether
Yeah,
it's to be a qualified accountant or not. Really, their career success is going to be defined by their approach beyond that. It's their communication skills, assertiveness, ability to be able to move processes forward, leadership, like the skill. And it's the same in the legal space as well.
yeah,
Someone could be a really first class family lawyer, that could be a criminal investigation lawyer, but if they want to build a business and bring people with them, leadership is a separate skill. And I would say the same in finance. So say within the CFO space, that sort of strategic awareness. So the sort of number crunching, for want of a better phrase, is sort of taken as a given, and it's the real value skills of being able to bring a business forward, to be able to provide valuable information to a CEO, to a leadership team, to be able to provide commercial information. That what I call sort of assertiveness. There's a sweet spot there. It's the same in our own sector. If someone's OTT assertive, you tend to find yourself in confrontation. But if someone's not assertive enough, which is probably a little bit more common, just things don't, you need a level of, you need to be able to move processes along. You need to be able to make decisions and move things forward. So yeah, I would agree with you about the attitude
yeah.
piece.
And there's a lot of misunderstanding about leadership and a boss. And it's amazing how many bosses don't understand.
Mm.
And that's a piece that we would work on a lot. So tell me, since you became a business owner, since you went out on your own, can I ask you, what would you say is the biggest learning that you've had since you became the business owner?
If I could just pick one, there's any number. I think every day is and I mean that genuinely sort of a learning experience. Look, I think I was very lucky. I think my mother from a young age told me it's sort of not what happens, how you deal with it. I think in relation to just managing as a business owner the highs and lows that go with, so you're never, I think it's trying to keep a sort of an even keel. We're very lucky, we've had great success, the market's been good. We've been achieved a lot of recognition. The team has grown by 50% each year, both in revenue as well as
Wow.
the team size, which has been strong. But there's been a lot of challenges. There's been parts of this year have been challenging, parts of previous years have been challenging. You're really only as good as your last placement a lot of the time. So I think it's keeping a sort of an even keel. So that what I call sort of state management, that I'm not, I've sort of invested a lot myself in terms of personal development and exercise. And I really strongly encourage that from a team perspective, because I think that business will always be, it's the nature of it. There's always going to be lots of changes and challenges. We're in really the ultimate people business. You've effectively
Yeah.
two customers, you've got your clients and candidates. So I think to counter that, I mean, what we do, and this isn't perfect, but it's been sort of helpful. Most of the guys are in most of the days. It's just the nature of our business. We have a lot of discussions internally, when we're working together. There is a hybrid structure in place for some of the people, but on Thursday we all come in at 11 o'clock. We spend at least 45 minutes together from a training development perspective, very often bringing in external people, but to really sort of challenge our thinking, and we work on a sort of a flat structure in that regard. At 12 o'clock then there's a gym, Dublin Sports Clinic, that we train in, and it's these sort of hit sessions whereby it's sort of exercise, and I think that's good. Again, it's sort of, there's a bit of a leveling out. Basically, we're sort of all in it together, and then we've lunch together for sort of 45 minutes, an hour after that. Generally local restaurant, and that's sort of a social piece. So I think that's been good, for bringing together alignment, to have that sort of piece. And I would strongly encourage healthy lifestyle habits and state management, which I think is beneficial in a sector whereby, there can be lots of ups and downs.
And it's funny when we ask that question, but ultimately you're leading there is developing a culture, which is something which certainly 20 years ago was not on the tip of my tongue. When I was employing people, culture, what do you mean culture? It's all about me. It's changed totally. So again, right now, I presume your business is, when I say a bit more difficult in the sense that we're kind of at 0% unemployment, pretty much 3.7, 3.8%, which is regarded as being full. Does that make it harder for you guys? Or do you find that there are people who are looking for that different culture, perhaps, that might make them want to move? Because a lot of people don't move just for money.
Yeah, I think like the applications you get, and you often do get good people who are looking, but sometimes it's people who are sort of bouncing around jobs every few years or so, and it's very much sort of money driven. I think high performers are generally motivated by challenge, career development, that they'll be at a company maybe slightly longer and really sort of push themselves to achieve the highest level of success. And then for us, it's having those relationships that when a good role comes along. So I would say most of the people we place, we would describe as being sort of passive job seekers. In terms of the future for the sector, so I think we're definitely seeing a much more of a sort of a partnership model between ourselves and our clients at the moment. So in addition to providing people services, we offer a sort of a service offer called Talent as a Service, whereby effectively companies come to us and we're an outsourced recruitment partner. So we work with them and design their job specs. We provide psychometric assessments for their leadership team. We build to the job profiles with them. And then effectively that video interviewing piece is very useful. We share the video interviews, and I very often sit in now on some of the senior level interviews. And I think that because HR professionals are harder to find, and can be quite expensive, our offering in that space is probably more cost effective. We obviously, our spend then is advertising across all the different channels. So we have a huge spend between Irish Jobs, Indeed, LinkedIn, our own website as well. So I think that's sort of a key piece. And then for that, then we would provide, competitor analysis from a people perspective. So we have one or two construction companies. These would be some of the, the bigger companies in Ireland. They're very interested to know, they want to know everything about salaries at their level, what people are moving for, what the challenges are. I think the alignment piece is critical from a hybrid working perspective. So I think that there's a little bit more of a change about companies being slightly more in office, and I think building a structure that is probably understanding on both sides is important. We strongly encourage people when they're moving jobs to work with the employer, and if that means 4 or 5 days in the office initially, then to go with that and build up the trust, build the right relationships internally before looking to step away. I think beyond that, there's probably is a higher percentage of people who are looking for a little bit of flexibility. Not everyone, and you'd be surprised the number of people actually who really want to go in to the office every day. But I think it's just having a little bit of a sort of a two-way street, and if we can inform that and help by providing information, that's certainly useful. But I think our sector is moving in the right direction. There's far less attrition in the recruitment sector than there used to be. It would have been common in the past where I think less than 50% of people were successful, were still in the sector after 6 months from joining. A total lose-lose situation. As you know, to hire in Dublin, it's very hard to get someone. A base salary now is probably going to be, certainly high 20s, 30,000 euro. There's huge time and energy investment in terms of getting people up and running. So I think that's been good for the sector in general. I think a lot of business owners have had to look at themselves and saying, right, well, if we're hiring the wrong people or people are leaving our business, probably a case of looking in the mirror and providing the right structure and framework where it's hard to say success is inevitable, but that you're giving people really the best chance of success, to I suppose develop within the organization.
Well, as you know, maybe in the Action Coach program, we kind of look at this as building the team, allowing the team to do the work rather than being told to let them grow. And from what you described in your 15 to 16 staff, you're providing that culture where they can grow within under your statesmanship, if you like, that you're able to guide them along and help them to grow. So, one last question here. If you were to give any advice to a young fella, say an 18-year-old you, again, what advice would you give?
It's a good question. I think just, keeping just keeping the focus, and maybe focusing on what's in your control, probably that mature reflection, worrying a lot less about what's going on around you, what other people are doing. I think it's good to invest. I mean, some of the personality profiling, we use McQuaig, which you find quite useful. It's more of a working style perspective, but I think there are a lot more career assessment tools out there that can give you a bit of a leaning towards what you might feel most suited to. Certainly when I finished school, there was far less discussions about what options existed. It was most people were going to become accountants, solicitors, whatever else. And maybe if you weren't going down that path, it was really hard to predict exactly what you were going to do. Whereas I think nowadays, really investing in what working style is going to suit you best, and then I suppose keeping yourself accountable for following through on those pieces, I think is important, and sticking at it.
That focus and accountability. Yeah, it's something we all need. Paul McClatchie, it's been fantastic talking to you today. So for those in the audience here to contact you, Paul, for a conversation, perhaps if they're looking for somebody, go onto your website, or what would the best means that you suggest?
I'm very accessible on LinkedIn, and just to mention about the employer value proposition, if there's any of your listeners who either you feel within your finance team or any of the areas we're focused on, you've either got people who are sort of like you don't feel maybe are up to proper their full potential, or you're finding it hard to get people, that employer value proposition piece I think is really, really useful. So happy to speak to any of your people who you interact with on that front. But LinkedIn, Paul McClatchie would be probably the best way to contact.
Fantastic. So accounting, banking, financial, legal, and insurance would be the top 4 pillars that you'd be working on. So guys, if you have any questions that you'd like to discuss with Paul, reach out to him, and I think you'll be very pleased with the results. Paul, thank you so much for participating today in the Business Spotlight. Wishing you every success, and we'll talk again soon, please God.
Thanks, Tom.